Welcome to this week's YouTube edition of True Hauntings. I'm Anne.
And I'm Renata.
You can talk about it. I'm very excited.
This week we're talking about something that a lot of people do not like to even think about, and that is haunted dolls.
And we've got our very own, haven't we? Miss Gertie right there.
Oh, no,
She's so famous.
Yeah, I know.
Infamous.
So, this particular doll is only 3 feet tall and made of mohair. He lives in a protective glass cabinet inside an old Civil War era fortress by the sea. And he seems to be known for his very, very particular way in treating people who wish to take his photograph. Who are we talking about?
Oh, we are talking about Robert the doll. Do not take his photo without asking permission, or horrible things happen.
Horrible, horrible things happen. So Robert the doll belonged to a little boy called Eugene.
He was a gift, wasn't he?
He was a gift from, we're not quite sure. There are a couple of stories about that, but more of that in our podcast. Eugene's middle name was actually Robert, so Eugene called his doll Robert, but Eugene was one of those precocious little children who was very, very artistic.
I think he was an only child too.
Yes. And so this gift of a doll was really important to him because this doll actually became his best friend. Robert the doll went everywhere with Eugene, and I mean everywhere. So the strange phenomena actually started to happen way back when Eugene was still a small child, and the parents would go past Eugene's closed bedroom door and find voices coming from behind the door. It seemed like Eugene was having a conversation with someone.
And somebody was answering him back in a different voice. There's also stories of him in bed and the parents would hear furniture being thrown around and they'd race into the child's bedroom, find him huddled up in a corner, terrified, Robert sitting at the end of the bed, and furniture thrown all around his room.
But of course Eugene would say,
the doll did it.
Robert did it. This is all Robert's fault. Now, as Eugene grew older, his artistic abilities obviously also escalated, and he went to Paris, where he did some art courses.
Fine arts. He was like a young man at that stage.
Yeah. And he met his wife-to-be.
But you've left out something important. Who went to Paris with him?
Oh, Robert, of course.
The doll went with him.
Robert went everywhere. And apparently Robert went on the young couple's honeymoon as well.
Oh,
now,
that'd be as bad as having your mother-in-law stand at the end of the bed.
No,
God.
It would be far creepier. There is a doll at the end of the bed and we are just a newlywed couple. Thank you very much. No.
You don't think a mother-in-law would be creepier? All right, go on.
Possibly. So Eugene's wife was called Anne, and she took a terrible dislike to Robert.
I think it was jealousy.
And so she would actually say to Eugene, now come on, do something with this doll. I can't cope with it anymore. You speak more to the doll than you do to me. And so eventually what happened was Robert was locked in the upstairs attic.
But mind you, he wasn't just locked up there and left.
No, he had a whole...
They built a little room for him with a bed and all sorts of things and left him on the windowsill so he could look out the window.
And so the story goes, children would walk past and see movement in the upstairs window.
And the doll would change position.
Yeah, and sometimes wave at them. Creepy as, huh?
Okay, fair enough.
And so there would be people coming into the house to do renovations and things, and they would hear knocks and bumps and whatever, and, creepy things would happen. Eventually, though, the sadness of Eugene's death crept over the whole family in the house. And then what was to happen with Robert the doll? Anne was left.
Anne was left, and Anne was happy to finally get rid of Robert and stuffed him in the basement.
Yeah. Now, did you think that Robert was going to like that?
No, Anne died not long after Robert died. Was it Robert?
Story doesn't end there.
Nope.
Because there were certain new people that took over the house, and Robert was locked away in the basement for quite some time without anyone actually knowing he was there. But, of course, he was eventually found, and when he was found, everything started to happen again.
Well, they gave it to the daughter of the new owner.
Yeah.
And they found it and said, oh, here you go, sweetheart, you have a little play with this. And then she would start to awake in the middle of the night screaming.
Yeah. Nightmares,
Bloody
things
Robert.
would be moved. Robert was active all over again. Eventually, the owner got really sick of all of this, and so they took the doll to the local museum, which was the Key West Martello Museum. And the doll landed up as part of the exhibition. But things didn't stop there, because Robert, as far as we know, is still really alive and causing issues and problems.
So at the museum, he then started to cause problems there.
Moving things.
Yes, apparently his pet lion was thrown at one of the caretakers. There was a cleaner at night who had turned off all the lights and gone home. Next day came back and all the lights were on. Footsteps are heard throughout the museum. But the biggest thing that they have found is that you must ask permission of Robert to have a photo taken. He doesn't like it when you take a photo without permission, and nasty things happen. And if you listen to the podcast, you will hear a couple of the letters the museum has received from people who had suffered horrible things straight after leaving the museum because they made fun of Robert, or they didn't ask permission, or they poked their tongue out.
So yes, he apparently curses them to the extent that Robert is now sitting in a glass box.
A protective glass box.
A protective glass box. And even in his box, the staff will say that occasionally they find him in different positions.
Now,
That's weird.
yeah, he's moving around even inside the box. But the little rules, I'll quickly run through
go
those.
through the rules.
You must greet and introduce yourself to Robert. If you want to take a photo, you must ask his permission. But how do you know if he said yes? What if he said no and you go and take a photo anyway? You think you're safe? I suppose if the camera works, you know you've got a yes.
Yeah.
Treat him with respect. Don't make fun of him. And make sure before you leave, you say, goodbye, Robert. Thank you for letting me take your photo.
What about the gifts some people have left?
Oh, yes. So the museum regularly receives gifts. Apparently Robert has a sweet tooth, so they receive lots and lots of lollies to make sure that the little demon inside Robert doesn't sneak out. He also gets money. I think they might be trying to pay Robert back a little bit to say, I'm sorry for what I've done, here's some money. But yes, Robert's also received joints. I wonder which caretaker at the museum suggested that would be a good idea. Do you know there's been lots of movies made about him, and there's one particular movie that's quite famous, Chucky.
Oh.
Apparently that inspired.
There you go.
It was inspired by the Robert the Doll movie, but there's also the movie called Robert, The Curse of Robert, Revenge of Robert, Robert Reborn. So it's a plethora of movies about Robert. But Robert now actually has a PA.
Yes,
got a personal assistant.
And he has a Facebook page.
He does.
And a web page.
Yes, and apparently his voice reads out some of the letters his voice reads out some of the letters on his website that he has received. So if you want to check that out, it's robertthedoll.org. But yeah.
Yeah, come back to our podcast. It is called Robert the Doll. And check out the whole story. Make sure that you subscribe to iTunes or go to Spotify or anywhere good podcasts are heard. And make sure that you leave us a review, because that means that we can keep coming back and bringing you
good
more
review.
and more great entertainment.
Yep.
So we shall see you on the dark side.
See you on the dark side.